You're live.
Good morning, Summa scholars. Today is Friday, March. Welcome to the Daily Summa. Today is Friday, March 28th. Still the third week of Lent. Good morning, Joe.
Good morning.
Have you had a nice, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed morning today?
No.
Yeah, that's what I figured. Yeah.
No, sir.
Well, my morning was good, except I'm feeling some of the fasting fatigue.
Hmm.
I'm wondering, I had started eating more bread than I have in the past, like 2 or 3 years. I'm wondering if that is some of the effect of it. I'm feeling better now. I ate some salt, some Himalayan salt and other salt and drink water, but I'm feeling a little pep now. And I'm sure the sun coming up and doing the show and blah, blah, blah is helping. But I felt the fatigue. I felt the fatigue of the fast. The good thing is tomorrow evening, Shabbat. Yeah. So I may do a grocery run this morning. Got to get a couple things for Sabbath. I have no wine. They have run out of wine. They have no more wine, says the Blessed Mother. So that needs to be rectified. And I'm thinking about giving myself a little treat. I might get some more coffee. I'm starting to run out of that. But this is a good teachable moment. You have to feed the donkey. You have to be gentle with yourself. And there's a coffee shop that you know, Joe, that I love to go to in that certain town. And so I may go there and get me a cappuccino or something. Just a little treat coffee.
Yeah.
Gotta pull yourself along the way, because I don't want to leave the house is the thing. I'm feeling fatigued. I still have to go
Right.
do the animals, carry lumps of hay and throw it, But so any news, Joe? Because I have a couple. Oh, I forgot. I didn't write who I was going to offer up my study for. You know what? I offer up this study, and when I say I offer up this study, and this goes for all of you too, you're offering up everything connected to it. Don't forget that. I had to wake up this morning early. Well, I usually always woke up before dawn anyway, but still, let's dramatize it. I had to wake up early, do my prayers, and then I had to restudy this page, which I normally wouldn't have to do. I had to do some research, have to think about it during the day. All of that's wrapped up into my study, and all of that I'm offering up for Andrew Doty in his discernment process.
Very good.
Yeah, dude. And then we need to move the skull through this desert. Let's go. Boop.
Bam.
Boop. Done.
Oh, I
And
might have
again,
skipped something.
Ruh-roh.
I might have skipped one.
Let's. I would love to skip a bunch. By the way, we should be at 21, right?
I don't know. I can't
think
read
we're
it.
at 20. Oh, I think we're at 21, which means we have just gone over the hump. Rejoice, all you Lenten observers. We are over the hump, I think. Now, we do have Holy Week, which is Maundy Thursday, which, by the way, for many years on Maundy Thursday, starting this tradition came to me from the monastery. They actually did this at Little Portion, the monastery I was in for 5 years. Every Maundy Thursday, and this is kind of a thing a lot of Catholics do around the world anyway, but we did a Passover Seder. And so I was so impressed with that. Of course, I had studied Judaism and stuff before I entered the monastery. And so when I got there and found out they did a Passover Seder, that was very powerful. And they would do this cool thing too, where they would take off the legs of the tables that we normally ate on, they would take the legs off. They went through a lot of trouble, and they made this Passover Seder beautiful. It was really a community experience with all the monks and brothers and sisters and everybody and guests sometimes around the table. And then they would put like coffee cans under the table so that to hold it up, but that it was still low to the ground, like the tables would have been in first century Israel. So everyone is actually laying on the ground, leaning to the side, like they would have been doing at the final Pesach, what Catholics call the Last Supper. But the final Passover Seder, where our Lord instituted the Todah celebration. Todah is Hebrew for Thanksgiving, and Eucharist means Thanksgiving. The final Todah, Eucharistic Thanksgiving Passover Seder. And so it was very cool. And after I left the monastery, I kept doing that. And then I started doing it with my buddy Mike Weisbrot when we lived together for a while. So I'm thinking about maybe proposing, possibly to you, Joe and Mary Kate, or more probably to Erin, Miss Erin. Don't need to say her last name, I suppose. Miss Erin and Lucy and Elizabeth and that crew over there to do a Passover Seder. The only thing is, I would want you and Mary Kate at the Seder. And often at Whitebread's house, Whitebread started doing it. So his family took up the tradition. So now they do it even when I'm not around. And they'll have like 40 guests with children. It's a madhouse. The Passover Seder is like 40 guests with their children. Kids are, it's amazing. And all the cooking that woman might have to do. But anyway, I may see if I can do a Passover Seder somewhere, somehow, back home, I suppose I would call it home.
Paul is laughing somewhere.
We'll see. But we're over the hump, and we're heading very, very quickly to Maundy Thursday, the Passover Seder, and then next is Holy Saturday, and then of course Good Friday. So we still have some fasting and difficult times to go, but after that, after Good Friday, I think, and Holy Saturday, I think we all know what happens. We have an octave.
Yeah, that's right.
8 days of prayer, no fasting, feasting. I'll probably get some of that gunpowder gin that I get on octaves, special occasions. It's going to be glorious. And don't forget, folks, no Daily Summa during the octaves. Woo! That's going to be a change up, switcheroo. So we've got some exciting things coming up, folks. We've got some exciting things in this page, too. I heard back from Dr. Rebard. It's very interesting what I heard back from Dr. Rebard. But should I say, just to clarify and blah, 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 why the Catholics do the Monday, Thursday, and that it's not that Passover Seder is not the same day as the real Passover. The real Passover is a lunar calendar, and it's different days every year. And very rarely does the true Passover line up with the Monday, Thursday celebration. The Monday, Thursday Passover Seder is a reenactment of the Passover Seder that Jesus had with his apostles. And 2,000 years ago, when Jesus did the Last Supper or the final Passover Seder, 2,000 years ago, the lunar calendar would have been such that the Passover, at least Passover the first day, not Passover Sheni. A lot of people don't know there's 2 Passover days. Anyway, that Passover would have been Thursday night. That's why we do it on Thursday. We're reenacting the past. We're rolling the time machine back 2,000 years. And on that day, 2,000 years, the lunar calendar would have been such that the Passover was on Thursday. And then he was crucified on on Friday, and then Holy Saturday, and then Sunday is Resurrection. So that's why it's done on Thursday, and that's why you'll see on the news Passover coming up next Tuesday. Different day than Monday, Thursday. Monday, Thursday is a reenactment. All right, I think that's sufficient. Don't think I have anything else to say. I can't wait for some good coffee. I got Starbucks coffee. I mean, a bag of Starbucks coffee beans. Probably roasted, maybe roasted, possibly roasted by my ex-girlfriend, Lindsay. She did a lot of roasting with small, big, amazing roasters, and now she's working at Starbucks. And she told me that this particular roast is the best of the bad coffee. Starbucks is the best of the bad coffee. And this particular roast is the best of the bad roasts. Guys, let's refer. I will read you the text from Dr. Rebard regarding. Oh man. Wow, this phone didn't register it. So I left the iPad out in the other room.
Okay.
I will give you the gist of what Dr. Rebard said. I was asking him about this reply to objection 4 with Article 11, and intellectual vision is of the things which are in the soul by their essence, as intelligible things are in the intellect, and thus God is in the souls of the blessed. Not thus is he in our soul, but by presence, essence, and power. Now, I can actually buy some time. We'll see if the technology lets me do this, because there's a guy who also teaches the Summa. A few people have tried to do what we're doing, as I've been told by Dr. Rebard, and as I've been told by somebody else told me that other people have tried to do this, and I suppose at some point it fails. So we'll see if ours fails, Joe. I think the thing that they don't have that we have, Joe, first of all, they don't have your good looks, and occasionally we can see you on the screen. So that's helpful. People are probably just waiting, when will Joe get back on screen? And then the other thing is they don't have a beaver galleon. That's a big deal. They aren't riding the beaver galleon, these people. They're just boringly, well, it's not boring. You guys do a great job. They're pedantically, that's even worse. They're just teaching the Summa. They're not sailing the high seas. So we have a little advantage. We have the beaver galleon. Here's what Dr. Rebard said. Here's my question. I said, Doc, hope you're doing well. The past few pages have come blah, 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 blah. Here's a question I have about Article 12, Question 12, Article 11. Intellectual vision is of the things which are in the soul in their essence. And I quote to him what I just said. And then I said, I'm confused as to why he says at the beginning, intellectual vision is of the things which are in the soul by their essence. And at the end, he says, in the souls of those living on earth, he is there by presence, essence, and power. It sounds like he's saying that God is in the souls of the blessed by essence. And then he uses the word essence again, talking about the souls which are still living on earth. Which is it? And Doc says, the objects of knowledge are in the soul by essence. And then he says post-rem, and I'm not sure what that means. Post-rem. That is secondarily upon their existence in the things themselves. As you cite in this text, he does not address the souls in the beatific vision. I'm not quite sure in this passage how to construe presence and power. Perhaps present by his power. So Doc says, I'm not quite sure how to construe presence and power in this text. Okay. And then the guy that I had looked at, who also teaches this, when he got to this part, he says, I don't know what this means. And then he said the famous, I think he's French, commentator on Thomas, Gerard, something. That man does not address this text. And Thomas does not comment on it anywhere else. So what I'm getting at is the thing that I got hung up on, it seems everyone's hung up on. What do you think of that, Joe?
That's encouraging, I suppose. So,
Exactly. I think it's a little encouraging.
yeah.
That it's encouraging to me. I remember this reminds me, this is going to be self-aggrandizing, but I have no problems putting myself down when necessary, and I have no
We're at
problems.
15 minutes, by the way.
Okay, cool. This is a short page, I think you know. And I have no problems saying what's true. I remember I was very encouraged in college, because you got to remember, I got straight like D's in school, and I quit high school. So, you know, when I got into college, I didn't quite know where I fit in the ability range of all these people. I mean, I thought they were goofy, but I was self-aware enough, at least in my arrogance back then, to think, well, I could be wrong though. And I remember getting a page back from one of my professors that said, your ability for clear thinking is masterful. Your capacity for clear thinking is masterful. That was encouraging. That was like, oh, this professor, this doctor is like saying I have clear thinking. I like it. This is likewise encouraging that the thing I got hung up on, everybody is getting hung up on, and Doc is not quite sure how to construe it. Now, I have thought about it, and I looked over at the Latin to see something about the punctuation here. And I do have an idea, but I want to think it through a little more. And if I have something to say, I'll talk to Doc about it, and then we'll get back to you. But again, so important to realize what I've said over and over. Guys, we're not here to get all the answers. We're here to stare at our beloved's hands. We're still here to ask more questions. In the dark cave is the treasure that you seek. And that brings us to knowing. Thomas uses the word knowing here a lot. And in my humble opinion, it's a bit confusing because, as I've said before, the Hebrew word is Hachmut, Bina, Das. Hachmut is wisdom, Bina is understanding, and Dat or Da'at or Das, depending on if you're Ashkenazi or Sephardic. That word Das is the same word that's used with Adam knew his wife Eve. So when you use the word knowledge, it's a little confusing when it's translated over into Latin and then English, and I'm not sure Thomas is using these concepts in the same way, these definitions in the same way. So it becomes a little confusing. I will address that a little bit later in this page. So let us go now to this short page. 119 in our beautiful books here. And we'll just start with objection 2. We'll skip that little first part, which we read yesterday, and go straight into Article 13, whether by grace a higher knowledge of God can be obtained than by natural reason. Objection 2, we got Ralph straight on deck. Further, we can acquire the knowledge of divine things by natural reason only through the imagination. And the same applies to the knowledge given by grace. For Dionysius says that it is impossible for the divine ray to shine upon us except as screened round about by the many-colored sacred veils. Therefore, we cannot know God more fully by grace than by reason. That's interesting. What I find interesting is the Dionysius quote. My question would be, so Zohar, the mystical teachings of Kabbalah, were not written down until, I think, a few hundred years after the church started. But they were always around. I mean, they were around as oral tradition, talked about by the Jews. I wonder how much these guys knew about this stuff, because this language here is very Kabbalistic. It is impossible for the divine ray to shine upon us, except as screened round about by the many-colored sacred veils. That's just like almost straight out of Kabbalah. So I wonder how much these guys knew. I know that later ones, after it was written down, like Thomas, I think, I know St. John of the Cross quotes things that are straight from the Kabbalah and are only from Jewish tradition. Like St. John of the Cross says, the manna that they ate in the wilderness turned into whatever taste they want it to taste. John of the Cross says that in his book. Well, that's nowhere in the Bible. That's in Midrash. That's in the Jewish oral tradition. So I know that these guys are reading those things once they were written down, but Dionysius, I think, was before. I'm not positive about that. Anyway, interesting questions here, guys. This is the excitement of theology. This is the things that people like Scott Hahn, Brant Petrie, all these guys, Ray Budd, would, Mr. Budd, would talk about, not on your normal YouTube show, because they know that most people can't handle it. They're like, what are you talking about, Jewish mysticism? I heard that that was satanic. People don't know what the hell they're talking about. So people don't talk about these things publicly, not because they're secret, not because they're Freemason knowledge. It's because idiots, if I can be frank, can't put the things together, and you go off on these weird tangents and strange half-truths and things that you heard on a meme once, and you now take it as gospel. So people just don't want to talk about it in front of the average situation. But it's very interesting that these things are being brought out here. One funny one that I've heard recently, don't worry, Joe, I'm aware of the time. How does he do it? We'll see if he can do it again. One funny thing I heard about with the gate in which Pontius Pilate brought our Lord out to the Jews, the leadership of the Jews, who were wanting to have him crucified. They brought him in and out and scourged him, brought him out with the purple robe and all this horrible stuff. That gate, when you go to Jerusalem, they take the pilgrims to this one certain gate and tell them that that's the gate. And the archaeologist that I have watched, who, by the way, has a master's degree in archaeology, and to me, more importantly, he knows the people. He's not just a book knowledge guy. He lived in the Middle East when he was a child for many years and knows a bunch of people. And that, to me, is more powerful than any degree, almost. But he went to this other gate where they had excavated Herod's temple, and they actually know that that's where Herod's temple is. And he was like, well, this is actually the gate. The funny thing is, the gate that they take all the tourists to was built 200, it was a Hadrian build. So it was like 200 or 300 years after the fall of Rome. Maybe 100 or 200 years, I'm not sure. But it was this gate was made way after Jesus lived. So we know archaeologically, historically, that it's impossible that it's that gate. But that's the one they take all the tourists to. And then this other gate that he was showing them, that's the real gate, because it's walled up. Somebody had walled it up, so there's a staircase that just goes to a wall, and there's no gate. So you can't take tourists to a gate that's just a wall with a bunch of ruins out in the field with nothing there. It's not sexy. It's not good looking. They can't see the gate. This is the whole point I'm trying to get about with idiots. Remember what the word idiot means. It's someone who doesn't have real knowledge of something. We're all idiots in some sense. To Asian, our buddy Asian, who's a carpenter, I'm an idiot when it comes to carpentry. But most people, when it comes to theology and the things of this, are idiots. So you can't take the idiot to a wall. You have to take him to some kind of gate. So you take him to the gate that was made 200 years after, and they don't know. And then the funniest thing was, they go into the compound. They have to go around because, as I said, the gate is walled up. They have to go in the place of Herod's Herod's palace, they had excavated, and they show the actual floor that Jesus probably walked on. But this excavation was just about the size of a house, small excavation, and it was in the middle of a parking lot. Nobody cares about it. No, I mean, the people who know, but most people don't know yet. So it's just a parking lot. There's like cars parked around. And then there's a big hole in the middle of the parking lot where they had excavated, and you can see the tile floor of Herod's temple. I keep saying temple, Herod's palace, where Pontius Pilate was at the time, because Herod had gone. And that's probably where Jesus walked. And it's in the middle of a parking lot where nobody's visiting. Everybody's visiting this gate that was built 100 years after Jesus lived. Funny. Just be aware of that, folks. That's a dynamic of life. Most people don't follow the herd, is the point. Okay, objection 3. Further, our intellect adheres to God by grace of faith, but faith does not seem to be knowledge. For Gregory says that things not seen are the objects of faith and not of knowledge. Therefore, there is not given to us a more excellent knowledge of God by grace. Let's go to the sed contra. The apostle says that God hath revealed to us his Spirit, that none of the princes of the world knew. Okay. On the respondio. I answer that we have a more perfect knowledge of God by grace than by natural reason, which is proved thus. Okay. Thusly prove it, Thomas. The knowledge which we have by natural reason contains two things: images derived from the sensible objects and the natural intelligible light, enabling us to abstract from them intelligible concepts. I think we've said this. He's setting things up. Light comes into our eyes. We see forms. We see accidents, and through that we intuit, or we are able to see the forms. Now, in both of these, human knowledge is assisted by the revelation of grace, for the intellect's natural light is strengthened by the infusion of gratuitous light. And sometimes also the images in the human imagination are divinely formed, so as to express divine things better than those do which we receive from sensible objects, as appears in prophetic visions and dreams. While sometimes sensible things or even voices are divinely formed to express some divine meaning, as in the baptism, where the Holy Spirit is seen in the shape of a dove and the voice of the Father is heard, "This is my beloved Son." Divine grace is there with the dove and the voice, but it's still sensual. Just because it comes from heaven, everything comes from heaven. We just don't see it that way. That's part of the fallen nature of man. We're very blind. If you saw clearly, you would be in awe of everything around you. That coffee cup, everything would be a state of awe for you. And we're not in that phase of our existence yet. We're still in the phase of what Kabbalah would call shadows, or hidden, Zimzum hiding, God hiding, so that we can have free choice and learn to grow into a loving creature that is actual loving of God, rather than serving God just for pleasure and gain. Okay, reply to objection 1. Although by revelation of grace in this life we cannot know of God what he is, and thus are united to him as to one unknown, still we know him more fully according as many and more excellent of his effects are demonstrated to us, and according as we attribute to him some things known by divine revelation, to which by natural reason cannot reach us. For instance, that God is 3 in 1. There's two ways in which we can know God in this life. We come to know him better and better. We don't fully know him, as in the divine beatific vision, but we do come to know of him through a real knowledge and interaction with him better and better through this life. Everybody knows that. Again, we're just repeating things and saying things that may seem obvious, but you have to look at the diamond from all of its facets to get to know it better. We do come to know God in this life better and better, and we also know him in a way that natural reason could never know, through divine revelation. And his example is the Trinity, that God is 3 in 1. Or that Jesus is fully God and fully man. He's not, a lot of Jews don't know this, by the way. I've watched a lot of content. They think we worship Jesus sort of like people worship Caesar, like that he's just a man and we worship him. But anyway, the divine revelation is Jesus is fully God in hypostatic union, united to fully man. there is this mysterious unity. Reply to objection 2. From the images either received from sense in the natural order or divinely formed in the imagination, we have so much the more excellent intellectual knowledge. The stronger the intelligible light is in man, and thus through the revelation given by the images, a fuller knowledge is received by the infusion of divine light. Those who saw the dove and heard the voice, even though it is a miraculous produced thing, it's still a vision, a sensual, sensible vision of a dove, and a sensual, sensible apprehension of a voice. So that is still on the natural level, even though it's supernaturally done at that moment in that particular way. This cup is not supernaturally done, although it actually is. That's what I was saying. If you really knew what was happening, everything would be wondrous for you, but the veil is put over your eyes so that you don't see this as God's efficient cause holding everything together in being. You can't see that. So you're not in a state of wonder. But when a dove comes out of the sky and you hear a voice, that shakes you up a little bit, but it's still a sensual apprehension. And so, but Thomas is saying that through that we can have a greater understanding of God, but it's still coming to us from a sensual level. So yes, by grace, the grace being the dove and the voice, by grace you can have a higher knowledge of God, coming closer and closer, but you're still not grasping the divine essence, which you will see in the beatific vision. Reply to objection 3. Faith is a kind of knowledge inasmuch as the intellect is determined by faith to some knowable object. But this determination to one object does not proceed from the vision of the believer, but from the vision of him who is believed. Thus, as far as faith falls short of vision, it falls short of the knowledge which belongs to science. For science determines the intellect to one object by the vision and understanding of the first principles. And I have to admit, I don't know exactly what that means, but there's something good in there. I was thinking about it yesterday. His use of the word science is great because it's knowledge, and our knowledge, faith falls short of vision. It falls short of the knowledge also that belongs to science. There's a particular knowledge when you have a full demonstration in front of you. That's a particular kind of immediate knowledge. So in some sense, you could say that the knowledge we have through natural sciences is more sure or more immediate. It's indisputable. It's shown. But faith is not that way. But faith is leading towards an object, and there has to be an object there for it to be believed in. That's why he was so adamant at the beginning in the first question to ask, is theology a science? And in what way is it a science? That's why he started this whole thing on that foundation, talking about science and what that means. All right, what time? How much time do we have, Joe?
33 minutes.
We're below 45 minutes?
Yeah.
Wow. How does he do it? We are moving on tomorrow, guys, to question 13, the names of God. This should be interesting. And names of God is a big deal in some other traditions and religions. Judaism, names of God is a big deal. Mohammedanism, as they like to say. Islam, names of God is a big deal. Christianity, kind of. You'll hear evangelicals, there's a couple little names that they know. They know Jehovah Jireh. They know Jehovah Rephi, I think. Can't remember the Hebrew word exactly. There's a couple names that they know. Catholics, I don't think really know. Most everybody knows the Tetragrammaton. But anyway, we'll see what he has to say about the names of God. Do you have any questions, Joe, from what we just went through? Is there anything that was like, wait a minute, what was that?
No, not really.
Yeah. This is a reiteration of things. Natural reason. We had discussed some of these things at the earlier articles in this question. Essence of God can be seen with the bodily eyes, which is similar to natural reason. Whether any created intellect by its natural powers can see the divine essence. So at the end, he's contrasting grace and natural powers. So how does grace fit in with our natural powers of reason? I would like to say so, though, one thing about knowledge. And I'll put this at the end because it's a little scandalous, perhaps. And again, this is probably nighttime teaching stuff, but remember, knowledge is da'at. Adam knew his wife Eve. The way Thomas uses the word knowledge, some here, and I would love to hear what Ryan Budd says about this cognitio. That's cognition. So he's using a different word, it seems to me, than the word da'at, which is translated knowledge. So just keep that in mind, guys. Cognitio, cognition. That's the cogs moving around in your head, which is different than real knowledge. And one can have, it seems to me, knowledge of God, even though they don't know or apprehend who it is they're having knowledge of. And by that I mean what I had said before about the teaching in the Vatican Council, that everyone is groping for God. Some have more or less intellectual lights, that is, teaching, doctrinal teaching. But as we know, as the Pharisees show, you can have perfect doctrine and still miss the whole boat and never know him. Very dangerous. And you can, on the other side of the coin, you can have false doctrine, and that's going to be a much more difficult waters to navigate in your galleon, because your navigating tools on the deck on your galleon are not correct. So even though the stars are correct and the ocean's correct and your sails can be correct, your navigation is going to be off when you get into further and further heresies. Nevertheless, a very clever salesman, a very humble, clever navigator who's turns his eyes off. He's like, I don't understand this navigation thing, but I'm just going to look at the stars. He could still possibly get into port, or at least close to the port. And that port is the knowing of God, da'at. It seems to me that someone can, if they have humility of heart and they are ignorant through no fault of their own, that their beloved Father, how can he not reach down and pick up that little baby? How can he not? If Raymond comes to you, Joe, and he's wearing the wrong thing and he's done the wrong thing, but he goes, Daddy, sorry. That moves the Father's heart, and I can't see how it wouldn't be true for those who, through no fault of their own, have heresy and false doctrine. Likewise, someone can have all the right doctrine and miss it. So let us move forward, not focusing so much on the straw, but on the fire of contemplation that comes from the straw. Have a good day, guys. Bye.